Hello everyone. We had a great time in India exploring the fascinating life of Shivaji Bonsley, also known as the great Maratha or Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Founder of the Maratha kingdom in the 17th century today, you will discover the Maratha epic that he set in motion through his success, and which is essential to understanding modern India. If you haven't yet seen the mini documentaries I made about him, you'll still be able to understand this mini documentary without any problem. However, I strongly encourage you to watch those videos before moving on. The links are in the description. You might be wondering why I, good old D-Mystif Histoire, talk to you so much about these Marathas whom I've never even heard of in my history classes. Who are they? Is it really that interesting? And how is the Maratha epic an essential moment in the history of today's largest democracy, India? Let me introduce them to you properly before we explore their history, which will answer all these questions. The Marathas are a Hindu people from central India, whose origins date back to ancient times, and whose particularity is that they completely reshaped the political balance of the Indian subcontinent from the 17th century onward before dominating it, until the British finally managed to overcome them at the beginning of the 19th century, after 3 wars, which, by the way, they did not win all of, far from it, in order to be able to control India. To clarify this point and answer the questions asked of me in the mini documentaries about Shivaji. The term Marat in French refers both to the Marathi people who share a culture and a territory, Maharashtra, and to the ruling and warrior caste, which is called Maratha in the local language. So if we pronounce it in French, Maratha. If you want to get some clarification about how the caste system works in India, I have also put the link to the mini documentary I made on this topic for you in the description. With clarity achieved, let's embark on a captivating voyage through time to the 17th century Indian subcontinent. In the early 16th century, the Mughal Empire, an Islamic empire with Timurid roots, emerged as the dominant power in the region by overthrowing the Delhi Sultanate and establishing its rule in the Indian subcontinent. Furthermore, India was largely occupied by Islamic forces. Muslims had gradually taken over a significant part of northern India, and then various dynasties spread throughout the subcontinent. Relations between Muslims and local religions like Hinduism, which was and still is practiced by the vast majority of Indians, were especially tense. Contrary to certain beliefs, this was due to the intolerance of Islam as practiced by the conquerors, with the notable exception of certain Sufi movements and the Mughal Emperor Jalaluddin Muhammad Akbar. The Maratha epic begins in 1645 with the formulation of the Hindavi Swarajya, which literally means Hindu self-rule, by a young Maratha named Shivaji Bonsley. The Hindavi Swarajya is a concept that is more political than religious, with the central principle being that Hindus, who are by far the majority, should rule their own land, and not the Muslims anymore, who had slowly but surely imposed themselves by force over a significant part of the territory. As mentioned in the introduction, I have discussed in detail the extraordinary life of Shivaji Bonsley, who is still called the Great Maratha today due to his achievements. And so I will not cover it in this documentary. Nevertheless, what you need to know to understand what follows is that starting from the city of Pune in Maharashtra, as shown on the screen, he achieved this with very few resources. He triumphed over the Sultanate of Bijapur and the powerful Mughal Empire to found the Maratha kingdom in 1674 and to be crowned Chhatrapati. That is to say, in French, if we want to translate the idea behind this notion, it means the leader of leaders and the great king. He died in 1680, and then his son Sambhaji took power. The rest of the Maratha epic happened in 2 phases. The first phase was resistance against neighboring Islamic states led by Shivaji's descendants, followed by the kingdom's expansion. Then, of the empire, led by the Peshwas, the Maratha prime ministers. I will begin by recounting the history of Shivaji's descendants, who fought fiercely for the independence of the kingdom established by their renowned forebears, but also, unsurprisingly, for their own power before their formidable rise to power began. Marat, a few months after the death of Chhatrapati Shivaji, in January 1681, his eldest son Sambhaji seized the Maratha crown by force. Known for being proud, brutal, and lecherous, he is a poor leader. As a result, during his reign, the Maratha kingdom became disorganized, with many internal divisions and a weakening of the role of Chhatrapati. Nevertheless, Chhatrapati Sambhaji was a formidable and truly exemplary warrior. Once on the battlefield, placing himself at the heart of the fight and enduring the same hardships as his men, he proved it many times, especially when his kingdom had to quickly face the invasion of its territory by the Mughal Empire, which was quick to attack again as soon as news of Shivaji's death reached the imperial court. Emperor Aurangzeb, the last great Mughal, personally led the campaign this time to resolve the Maratha issue permanently and annex the declining Deccan sultanates. The first campaign, paced like all military campaigns in India by the monsoon season, finally began. In 1681, a massive Mughal army of around 100,000 men faced off against the Maratha kingdom's forces of about 50,000 dispersed across the kingdom and multiple fronts. This campaign ended in April 1683 with a failure for the Mughals, who were unable to establish a lasting foothold. And one of the symbols of this is the siege of Ramsej Fort, where a Maratha garrison improvised cannons by hollowing out tree trunks and made cannonballs out of animal hide. You'll agree that's ingenious, and they bravely and successfully resisted the Mughals' full might. The second campaign, from late 1683 to early 1684, was also a failure. The harassment tactics succeeded, and the Mughal generals' incompetence contributed to this outcome. The Marathas cut the supply lines, the Mughals starved the imperial army, which was then decimated by an epidemic. However, the third campaign proved successful. The Mughals, having conquered the Deccan sultanates in central India, have reached the zenith of their power. They try again. In 1686, they decisively defeat the Marathas at the Battle of Wai in 1687 and capture Chhatrapati Sambhaji in 1689. He is then displayed in the Mughal camp, then brought before Emperor Aurangzeb, refusing to submit and convert to Islam, allowing himself one last act of defiance by demanding the emperor's daughter's hand in exchange for his possible friendship. He ends his life cruelly tortured, mutilated, and then executed. Aurangzeb aimed to punish his enemy, terrorize and divide the Marathas, and destroy Shivaji's legacy. At this point in history, the situation appears dire for the Maratha kingdom. The state is divided and disorganized. The Maratha army is weakened, and its morale is at its lowest. Add to that the brutal execution of Sambhaji, as well as the capture of his wife, his son Shahu, who should have ascended the throne, and a large part of his entourage. The situation does not inspire optimism, but that would underestimate Marat's incredible resilience, which is why I'm discussing them today. While one could have confidently bet on the collapse of the Maratha kingdom, the exact opposite happened. Upon learning of the terrible circumstances of Sambhaji's death, the Maratha court elevates Sambhaji to the rank of Dharmavir, meaning protector of Hinduism and martyr. Then the Marathas crown another son of Shivaji, named Rajaram, before securing him in a nearby region, beyond the reach of any Muslim ruler. The war, which was waning when Sambhaji died, reignited with renewed intensity. Under the command of the Maratha generals, especially Santaji Ghorpade and Danaji Jadhav, the Marathas managed to regain their strength and launch a form of total war. The strategy proved extremely effective, but was particularly brutal for civilians on both sides. They applied the Ganimi Kava, which means victory through cunning in Marathi, a military strategy used by the Marathas both at the strategic and tactical levels. This approach, truly initiated under Shivaji and perfected during the reign of his successors, was meant to compensate for both numerical and equipment inferiority. By relying on high troop mobility and using various tricks and tactics to disorganize a more powerful enemy, they could then defeat them. In simpler terms, it vaguely resembles guerrilla warfare, but on a larger scale, relying on a fast and disciplined army. Chhatrapati Rajaram died in 1700, and it was his son Shivaji II, who was just a young child at the time, who ascended the throne under the regency of his mother, the Maharani. She is, by the way, the starting character of the Maratha Confederacy in the game Empire Total War. Tarabai, who was a strong-willed and determined woman, as well as a good administrator, personally commanded the military campaigns. With her skilled generals, she neutralized the Mughals by attacking their supply lines and invading their lands, going as far as making the Mughal territories temporarily tributary to the kingdom. The war forced Emperor Aurangzeb to divert troops to defend his territory, but he did not survive to see the conflict's conclusion. He died in 1707 at age 88. After over 26 years of war that drained his armies, finances, and empire. But the war does not end there, and the Mughal court releases a certain Shahu, the son of Chhatrapati Sambhaji, who had been captured several years earlier and is now of age, to claim the Maratha throne. The Mughals hoped in this way to weaken the Marathas and eventually place a ruler on the Maratha throne whom they hoped would be docile, or at least favorable to them. This triggers an armed conflict in the Maratha kingdom, but it is quickly settled and Shahu officially seizes power in March in 1708 to the detriment of 11-year-old Shivaji II. The following year, in 1709, the Mughals, in the midst of a civil war where many factions are fighting either for the throne of the empire or for their independence, officially recognize Shahu, thus ending the war, which had nearly ceased with his rise to power. This de facto victory, seemingly miraculous, without the provided explanations, marks the start of the second phase of the Maratha kingdom. Its ascent to power turned it into an empire, marking the return of Hindu rule over much of India. Essential in order to understand the history of the subcontinent and modern India. The next mini-documentary, currently in editing, will cover the rise of the Marathas and is coming very soon. I first planned to cover this epic in one go. However, that would neither do it justice nor be enjoyable for you to follow. I also want to sincerely thank all of you for your admirable curiosity that made you click on this topic. It's a fascinating subject. I hope my enthusiasm is visible on screen and that you're enjoying this as much as I am. I also wholeheartedly thank Litchi for his wonderful illustrations and his valuable work by my side. Let me know in the comments what you liked, ask me your questions if you have any, and if you have any feedback for me. The content and form are both shaped in the same place. A thumbs up, subscription, and bell notification, if you haven't already, would be greatly appreciated to encourage our work. You can also support us through UTIP and Typee, which allows me to fund Litchi's work, access to certain sources, and the many hours I spend on this content. Once again, thank you so much for watching this content. Share this documentary with your loved ones and on your social networks so they can discover the history of the Maratha. And above all, keep your interest and passion for history. We'll be back very soon for the next part, and until then, I invite you to check out the excellent channels of the label Herodote, which I am a part of. I've linked the label's website in the description. See you very soon.